Alright, so welcome to the next video. In the last one, we created our entire backend. We created our API, which accepts a few routes. It has a few endpoints, such as API/items to get all of our items, a post request to API items to add an item, and then a delete request to API items/ID to delete that particular item. So now what we're going to do is start to work on the front end. We're going to start to work on React. So what we need to do is we need to create a new folder here that's going to be basically our client-side app. So I'm going to create a folder called client, and that's not a folder, is it? So let me just delete that and create a folder called client. Okay. So this is where our React app is going to go. Now we're going to use the create React app CLI to generate our application. We're not going to do any crazy Webpack setup or anything like that. So right now I have the backend server running. I'm going to go ahead and stop that and clear this up. And we want to CD into the client folder. Okay, make sure you CD into client. This is where our React app is going to go. So if you don't have create React app installed globally, then go ahead and do npm install -g for global and then create -react -app like that. I already have it installed, so I'm not going to do that. But once you have it installed, you just want to create React app, and I want to generate it in this folder. So I'm going to just do dot. Now you could have, from the root, you could have did create React app client and it would have just put it inside client. But you know, I just created the folder and then did dot. So it does the same thing. It's going to generate it in the client folder, which is what we want. And it's going to create a package.json. And keep in mind, this package.json is completely separate from your server's package.json. Okay, this is the client side. Everything in here is client side. Everything out here is server side. Okay, this is a full stack app. And this package.json should change once all this stuff is done. And this sometimes takes a minute or two. Okay, so this is the client-side package.json. It includes React, of course, React DOM, and then React scripts, because with Create React App, you can do like npm start. It'll run your dev server. You can easily compile and build out your app with npm run build. You also have test and eject. Now, this is a very, very important step. When you're building a full stack app the way we are, you need to add a proxy value in your package.json, because when we make requests, don't type this out, I'm just showing you something. When we make requests from React, we're going to be using Axios, so we want to do axios.get. We don't want to have to do HTTP localhost 5000 /API/items. We don't want to have to do that, right? So we just want to be able to do whether it's fetch or Axios, whatever you're using, you just want to go to API items and have it know what the hell you're talking about. So that's where this proxy comes in. So right under scripts, we're going to put a comma here, and then we're going to define a proxy. And that proxy is going to be our backend server. So it's going to be HTTP localhost port 5000. Okay, that way it knows what we're talking about when we put in an endpoint like that. So make sure you save that. And by the way, if you look at our React Express starter and we go into the client folder, package.json, you'll see we have the same thing. Okay, so we're essentially just kind of recreating this. Now we want to be able to run the back end and the front end at the same time. Okay, in our development environment. So what we could do, I mean, right now we could go in the client folder and we can run npm start. That'll start the React server. And then we could go into the server folder and run npm run server. That would run the server. But I don't want to have two command lines open at the same time and do all that crap. So what we're going to do is we're going to use something called concurrently, which will allow us to run both at the same time, which is fantastic. So let's cd back. So cd ... I want to go back to the server, okay, outside of the client. And actually, we don't even need to do anything. We don't need to do it down here. We want to open up our package.json in the server. Okay, make sure it's the server one, not the React one. And oh, that's right, I need to install concurrently. That's why I was down. Wait, we already have concurrently installed. Never mind. I'm friggin' going off the rails. All right, so we already have concurrently installed. If you don't see it here, go ahead and npm install concurrently. And then what I want to do here is I want to be able to just run the client if we want as well. So just like we can run just the server with this command. So I'm going to put in a client script. And what we want to do is run npm start, right? But we want to run it from the client folder. So what we can do is we can use -- prefix and then client. And what that does is it'll go into the client folder and then run npm start. At the same time, you could have done like cd client and npm start. You can do that as well, but I think the prefix, it just looks a little cleaner. And then that'll run the client. So right now we have the server. We can run the server. We can run the client with two separate commands. Now we want one that runs both, and we're going to call this dev. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to use concurrently. So we want to say concurrently. Did I spell that right? And then we need to actually do a little bit of escaping here. So we need to use a backslash and then some quotes, or a backslash, double quote, backslash, double quote, and then in here we'll put our command, and we want to do npm run server. Okay, so this will run this. That'll run the server. We also want to run the client, so we're also going to put in backslash, double quote, backslash, double quote, and in the middle here we'll do npm run client. Oh, we need one more double quote at the end here. There we go. So we can run the server separately if we want. We can run the client separately, or we can run both with npm run dev, okay, because that's going to run both of these. I hope that makes sense. One other thing that I want to put in here is a client install script. Okay, and we're not going to need to run this now, but just for future reference, if you want to move this app and you know, let's say you put it on GitHub, you're not going to have your node modules folder in your client included in GitHub. So if someone clones that, they're going to need to run npm install in the client. Now, instead of cding into client and doing it, I just want a script called client install. So what we'll do here is we'll just do npm install -- prefix client. Okay, we need a comma at the end here. That way you can just do npm run client install, and it'll install your client side dependencies, and you don't have to cd into that folder. So I think that that's it for the scripts, guys. And this should match up with the React Express starter that I showed you. So let's save this. And now, hopefully, we can do npm run dev, and it'll run not only the backend port 5000, but also the React dev server on 3000. So let's clear this up and let's try it. So npm run dev. Okay, so port 5000, and then it should open up our React server, and there we go. So we're now running the back and front end with one command. If I go to localhost 5000 /5000/API/items, there's our item. Okay, so we have both running, which is exactly what we want. All right, so now let's start to work on our React app. So let's see, I'll just leave this stuff open, and you can see now how this React Express starter works. And I did create a video you guys can watch if you want, creating that as well. But anyways, let's go back, let's close this up. We're going to leave the server running, both the front end and the back end, and I'll just make this a little smaller. And let's go into our client folder. All right, so from here, let's do a little bit of cleanup, because I don't want like all the default stuff. For instance, the logo SVG, we can go ahead and delete that. And we can delete index.css, we don't need that. We can delete, actually, We want to keep app.css, but just get rid of the CSS inside of it and save it. All right, and then let's go into, not public, let's go into the index.js file. And remember, we deleted index.css, so we want to get rid of that completely, that reference, and save. And we shouldn't have to touch this file again. Let's go into app.js, get rid of the logo because we're not using that. And for the render, I just want to keep the parent div and get rid of everything inside. And for now, we'll just put in h1 and we'll say hello and save. So now, if we go back to our React application, and right here, it should look like this, okay? And I'm going to just open up my console just to make sure there's no errors. All right. Now, we have some dependencies to add to our React application. All right, and the way that we're going to do this is we're going to start to build just our React application. We're going to use Reactstrap. We're going to use React transition groups, stuff like that. And then we'll move on to Redux. I want to kind of build it without Redux first, and then move on to Redux, and then ultimately, connect to our back end and make it a MERN stack, full stack application. So let's see, and bear with me, guys, because there's a lot that I have to do, and I'm trying to do it in the right order. But let's get Bootstrap set up. All right, so not just Bootstrap, but all the dependencies we need. So I'm going to keep the server running and just open up a new terminal. And I want to go into the client. This is very important that you go into the client folder. Okay, you should see this stuff, your public and source folder. All right, and then from here, we want to npm install Bootstrap. We want to install Reactstrap, okay, because Bootstrap basically allows us to use the Bootstrap CSS and so on. Reactstrap allows us to use basically Bootstrap components as React components. And then some other things we need is we're going to use something called UUID, which just generates random IDs. We're not going to ultimately need this because the IDs will come from the database, but just for now, I'm going to kind of build it with static data first, and then we'll connect our API. Let's see, what else do we need here? I'm not going to install Redux and stuff yet. Oh, we want the transition group. So React-transition group. And I think that's it for now. We'll do the Redux stuff later. And if we look at our package.json in our client folder, those should get added here. Again, make sure it's not in your server side. Okay, so that stuff has been added. Good. All right, so the first thing I want to work on the React side, as far as components, is our navbar. All right. Actually, before we do that, let's just make sure we import Bootstrap. So in our app.js, we're going to go right above this where we imported app.css, and we're going to import, and we want bootstrap /dist/css/ bootstrap.min.css, like that. And now if we look at our app, it should, yep, you can see that the fonts changed, the margins changed. Bootstrap is now being included. All right, so let's go back and let's create inside of our source folder, we're going to create a folder called components. And inside here, we're going to create a file called AppNavbar.js. So this is going to be our navbar, and we're going to be using Reactstrap for this. Now, if we look at the Reactstrap documentation, we don't need to see this right now. I'll just search for Reactstrap, and if you go to components, you can see examples of everything. So for instance, if you want an alert, you can bring that in from Reactstrap. You can add the color, and each component has its own properties. So if we look at navbar, you can see there's quite a bit here. They have drop downs and stuff. We're not going to need all of that. But notice that there is a toggle function and there's a piece of state called isOpen. This refers to the hamburger menu. When you have a responsive navbar and it's on a small device, you have that hamburger menu where you click and it kind of flops open all your links. That's what this is. It is open means that it's shut. If it's true, that means that it's open. And then toggle is just going to basically just toggle that. If it's open, it'll close it. If it's closed, it'll open. So we need to have this state, this is open, and this function as well. So I don't want to just copy everything from here because I don't like to do that. I will paste in some things, but for the most part, I want to just type everything. I know it can be kind of a pain, but just for those of you that are following along, and I would highly recommend that you follow along in these types of tutorials. So we're going to create a React component. So let's import React and let's import component from React. Okay, now we have a bunch of stuff we need to import from Reactstrap. So I'm actually going to paste this stuff in. Okay, so we're bringing in collapse because I do want to have the toggler. Even though the only link in our navbar is going to be the GitHub link, I still want to have the responsive hamburger menu just in case we add more links in the future. So that's what collapse and navbar toggler are for. Navbar is the actual navbar. We have the brand, nav, which will wrap around all the links. Nav item will wrap the nav link. The nav link will actually be, it'll have the href attribute on it. And then container is just a bootstrap container to move everything to the middle. So we want to bring this in from Reactstrap. Okay, now we'll create our class called AppNavbar. And we want this to extends component. And before I forget, like I always do, I want to export default AppNavbar. All right, so there's our class. Now, it does have, like I said, we need to have that is open state. So we can put a constructor here. Whoops, constructor. And we'll pass in any props that are passed in here. We'll go here. And then we need to call super, because that's going to call the parent class's constructor, and we also need to pass in any props there. Now, if we look at the documentation for the toggle function, okay, they have a toggle function like this. So toggle, whoa, I don't want that. Toggle like that. If we do that, then we have to bind this. So, and you guys that know React, you already know this, but for those of you that are kind of confused by it, we would do like this dot toggle equals this dot toggle, and then we would have to do dot bind and then pass in this. Now, the reason for this is in a React component, in a class, you have default methods or lifecycle methods like render, component will mount, component did mount. In those functions or methods, this is available, and this pertains to the class or the component. When you have a custom method like toggle, this isn't automatically included, so you would have to bind this to that function, and you could do that in the constructor. But there's a workaround. If you don't want to have to do this for all your custom methods, you can simply use an arrow function. So we could go like this. Okay, and this is just where any parameters would go, and then we just have an arrow. And now we don't have to do this. Okay, and then for the state, we can say this dot state, and state is just going to be an object, and it's going to have is open, and it's going to be set to false by default. Now, since we took out the binding because we're using an arrow function, we really don't need a constructor, okay? We can create state without a constructor. And all we have to do is take this and replace the entire constructor, which ends, oh, that toggle is outside of the class. I got to move that in. But we can just go like that, okay? And then let's make sure we move this inside the damn class. Okay. Now the toggle is actually very simple. All we're going to do is change is open to whatever it's not, because we want to be able to toggle it. So let's say this dot set state. Okay, we'll pass in the state object, and we're going to set is open to not this dot state dot is open. So whatever it's not. If it's closed, we want it to open. If it's open, we want it to close. And that's it for the toggle. So now let's create our render. Make sure we're still in the class. And we'll say render. And we want to render our navbar using basically using these different components. So we're going to have a parent element of just a div, and then we want our navbar, and this is all in the documentation as I showed you. It's a really cool way to use Bootstrap because it allows you to use Bootstrap in a React type of way. These take in properties, so like for instance navbar, we'll put in a color, and you can use any Bootstrap context color, so success for green, primary for blue. I'm going to use dark. You also want to add a dark attribute just to let it know that the navbar is dark, so the text should be light. And then let's do expand. Oops, I don't want those. Expand, for those of you that know Bootstrap, you can do a class of navbar expand SM, which it'll create the hamburger menu on small screens, or you could do MD for medium or LG for large. I'm going to do SM. I basically want the responsiveness to kick in on small screens. And then you can also just add regular classes with class name. So I'm going to add MB5, which is margin bottom 5. It'll just move everything down under the navbar. Okay, now in the navbar, I'm going to put a container because I like everything to be put, in the middle. For some reason, I can't use Emmet with this stuff. I don't know why. If anyone knows, let me know. I can use it within JSX, just not with these Reactstrap components. So in the container, we'll have our brand, so navbar brand. And see, that's why I keep forgetting these angle brackets because I'm so used to Emmet. And then this can take in an href if you want. We'll just have it go to slash. And then the text inside here, which is like our logo text, we'll just have it say shopping list. All right, and then under that, we want our navbar toggler, which is the hamburger menu. So let's say navbar toggler. And this is where we want to call the toggle function or the toggle method. So we want to do an on-click event handler, and we want to set this to a set of curly braces and say this dot toggle. Okay, and then we can just end that like that actually. And then underneath that is the collapse. Okay, because the collapse will come down. This is where we want to set an is open property. We want to set that to whatever the is open state. So this dot state dot is open. Okay, so we want to set that. We also want to say that this is a navbar, so we add this attribute because collapse it doesn't have to be part of a navbar. We need to let it know that it is. And then in the collapse, we put a nav tag, capital N, nav, and this takes in, well, it doesn't take in, but I want to put a class name of ML auto, which is margin left auto. It'll just align the links to the right, in our case just one link. And we also want to define navbar because you can have navs without navbars. And then inside here we want to put a nav item. No properties or anything. Let's close it up, nav item. And then in here is where we put our nav link. So we want a nav link. And this takes in an href. And for now, I'm just going to have this go to my GitHub, but ultimately it will go to the repository when it's created. So let's say https github.com/Brad Traversy. And then we want to end the nav link. And we want to put in here for the text, I'm just going to say GitHub like that. All right, so that should do it. Let's save. Now we're not going to see it obviously because we haven't included it in our main app.js file. So let's do that now. We'll go to app.js and let's bring it in. So import AppNavbar from, it's in the components folder and it's AppNavbar. And then what I'll do is just replace this h1. We no longer need that with AppNavbar. And let's save and let's take a look. Okay, so your render method should have a return statement. What did I do? What did I do? Render. Oh, that's, I need to look in here. I don't have a return. You guys probably saw that a long time ago. All right, so what I'll do is just grab this and move it in here like that. Get rid of that. Okay, let's try it out. There it is. All right, so that's our navbar. Let's make sure it's responsive. Bam, and there we go. So this is what I mean by the is open state. So it starts off false. When we click this, the is open state goes to true, and it just toggles. All right, so we have our navbar. Cool. Now, initially I wanted to get a little more in this video, but it's running kind of long, so I think I'm going to stop here. We did actually set up our client folder. We set up so that, you know, concurrently, so that we can run the server and the front end at the same time. And we also implemented Reactstrap. You saw how that works. We created a navbar. So in the next video, we're going to work on the shopping list component. Okay, so we're going to put that together. We're also going to use the React transition group module or package so that we can have the little fade effect and so on. And, you know, at first we're going to put all of our state just locally in the component. Then we'll move to adding Redux and we'll put our state in there, our data in there, and then we'll ultimately connect to our API and bring in the stuff from there and make our requests and all that. All right, so I know this is going to be kind of a long tutorial or series, but hopefully you guys are enjoying it and you're learning a lot from it. And that's it. I will see you in the next video.